There's a new Colossal that's been hitting tables in the recent weeks. Let's talk about Dusk's new big toy, the Phantasm. My name's Ryan. I used to be good at War Machine. This is the Spell Rack. The Phantasm has got to be one of the coolest models ever produced by Steamforged Games. The question is, how does it play on the tabletop? Now that we all have seen or will be seeing Phantasms in our local meta, I thought it was really important to talk about the play style of the model itself and what it does for Dusk. In my opinion, it significantly changes the faction. One of the ways I like to think about War Machine is when I'm building lists or approaching a matchup, I like to consider who has the ranged advantage in the matchup. It's kind of like the Magic idea of who's the beatdown, right? Who's the aggressive deck and who's the deck that's playing responses and waiting for the long game. So in War Machine, the question is, if you just stand 14 inches apart from each other, who wins that fight? Who has to come across no man's land to get to the other side of the table and engage models? Dusk has traditionally not had a very substantial gun line. Dusk has to come after people. That's where the cats come in, and you have Mirage, and Tyrus's feed is really good. And, there are some tools in Dusk to get across the table. But now the way Dusk plays can be very different with the inclusion of the Phantasm. I think Dusk now has a credible range skew list. That means that the question of who has the better range list got a lot more complicated. So let's look at the Phantasm a little bit and see why there's such a large change here. So the Phantasm has a lot going on for it. What I would like to focus on here is just its ability to produce a ranged gun line. The first thing is defenses. The Phantasm has Phantasmal Field. It gains 1 defense for each point of focus that it stores against range attacks. So if I'm keeping the Phantasm at range and it's got 3 focus on it, it's defense 14. That's not the worst thing in the world, but it means you're going to be boosting to hit, which means you may not have as much focus to boost damage. It's just going to drain resources. After defenses, of course, becomes what are its offensive outputs? The Phantasm can have up to 4 guns, and they all have pretty significant range. Its main gun here is a high POW gun at POW 15, but this gun is what gives the Phantasm significant utility on the tabletop. So let's look at the ammo types, mainly the first one and the third one. The first one is -2 speed for whatever it hits. If you are the superior gun line with Dusk and your opponent has to come into you, being able to put -2 speed on their most significant melee threat gives you a lot more space on the table. That means I can move the Phantasm up 2 inches without getting charged. It's just a fantastic control piece. The other item is the third one. This is this Radiant Blast item. Dusk does not deal well with high defense. We don't really have any good answers for it in faction, and to have it on a very expensive stick is a huge boon to the faction. So Radiant Blast on an AoE 3 can give -2 defense to everything hit. This means, especially like if you have if you have a defense 12 heavy that I'm trying to shoot off the table, I put it down to defense 10, and now my Rat 6 Colossal is hitting you on 4s. Way different math than if I'm hitting on 6s. Just increases my efficiency substantially. I'm going to jump now to the arms real quick because the Phantasm can have 2 different arms. One of the arms is just a melee weapon, very powerful, but a melee weapon. The other arm comes with a range 12 POW 14 gun. So this gun is the same range as that first utility gun we saw, range 12 POW 15, but here we're at range 12 POW 14. The addition of Deathly Dominion here also says that you can kill a model and then basically take an activation with that model and go make an additional attack. It's a nice way to clean out medium infantry and even some large infantry, and then to go make a reasonably high value attack. It just helps you with productivity. You got to get a lot of output out of something that's as big as a Colossal. So we have 2 of these, right? So that's 3 guns we're up to. For the 4th gun, we have 2 different options. The cheaper option is a spray 10 POW 14 with powerful attack. The focus efficiency of something like this is probably second to none in the game at this point. I mean, maybe you have Kruger with a spray 10 and he can double boost everything, but something like this being POW 14, absolutely incredible. This is a gun that can do a lot of work, and spray 10, it's 2 inches shorter than the other guns, but especially if you're putting -2 speed on stuff, you're still able to maintain some range domination. The other gun that's in that spot that is incredibly valuable is the Desolator here at range 14. Range 14 is amongst the highest range guns in the game, plus POW 15, AoE 3. Having AoE 3 is something that Dusk does not currently have access to, and here you have the ability to actually clean out from significant range some support models. You can hit a heavy with some gun mages behind it that are giving it focus and maybe clean up the gun mages. You could even maybe clean up some frontline troops that are armor 12, 13, 14 fairly reliably with a gun like this. Another point that I really want to add to the Phantasm for its output is going to be included in the Void Shaper. The Void Shaper has ancillary attack. So you're going to get 2 POW 15s, 2 POW 14s, all of those are boostable, and then you're going to have another ancillary coming through. That ancillary could be that range 14 POW 15, AoE 3, or you could use the utility gun again. So you could hit something with -2 defense, get that buff out there, and then hit something else with -2 speed off of the ancillary attack, putting a lot of utility out on the battlefield and really protecting kind of your line of engagement, including your Phantasm or anything else in your army. So now let's talk about what really kind of pushes the Phantasm up to 11, and that, for the most part, is going to be Helith. The Phantasm is going to be great in any Dusk army. It is a wonderful model, and it really changes the way the Dusk plays. Helith, however, really dials up its potency. First thing, offensively, True Sight. Giving a gun platform with 4 attacks the ability to ignore clouds and stealth is fantastic. No cloud walls, no stealth on, simple solos, units that have Prowl, Black 13, stuff like that. You can get after those pretty easily at this point with a buff like this. It allows you to ignore all of the rules except for, cover and concealment, right? Yeah, you can't see through forest, but you're still doing a ton of work. The other item here is Fire Group. Plus 2 inches of range on a jack that has range 12 and range 14 everything, or a range 10 spray. Going up to a range 12 spray, that valuable. Going up to a range 16 POW 15 attack with the AoE 3 with ancillary. It just changes the math on what your opponents need to do when they're approaching a Dusk list. So let's talk about that for another moment. As I said earlier, I think of War Machine as who has the superior range list, who has to come across into who. When you're building a list pair, you need to have one of your lists is going to got to play in a Signar, right? Signar's probably going to have a better range list than you. And so you need a way to get across the battlefield. How do I get into the Signar player? And everybody has tools, deceleration, deflection. You have -3 range abilities, either spells or on models. Now Dusk is going to ask you that same question. Can you get across the field with this Phantasm shooting you? And obviously Dusk has some other range options, especially in their medium infantry archers, range 12 POW 15. You put the Phantasm next to 2 units of those, and now you have a gun line. And so when you're building your list pair, one of your considerations for Dusk has to be, can I answer a gun line? And so maybe your list that you're playing into, say, Signar, because it can answer a gun line, maybe that has to also be your Dusk list now, because it's offering a similar gun line style. The difference is Dusk also presents significant speed and engagement threats with something like Tyrus, so Dusk can reach across the battlefield very quickly. And if you're trying to be a little bit cagier with some range defenses, and that Dusk player plays a list that's not running the range skew, maybe you run into some issues. Obviously, the spell rack is your friend here, being able to pick and choose your spells so that you can play into the matchup properly is going to be a huge boon so that you don't get into some sort of negative list chicken. The punchline, though, is I think the Phantasm will have a very strong effect on the meta of War Machine. It might take a little bit, but I do think the way Dusk plays is going to change and evolve, and the way people need to build lists to answer Dusk will have to change with it. Thanks. Talk to you next time.